Imagine walking into a pitch-black room where you're tasked with describing what's in front of you. Your hands reach out and feel something large, cold, and curved. It feels like a pipe, smooth and unyielding. You're certain of what it is. But someone else in the same room feels something firm and wide, like a wall. Another person touches something thin and flexible, almost like a rope. Each of you confidently describes a different reality, but all of you are touching the same object. This is how we move through life, each of us interpreting the world through the lens of our own experience, seeing fragments of a larger truth. Our perspectives are shaped by what we've touched, what we've seen, and what we've learned. But here's the challenge. What if our limited view blinds us to the bigger picture? What if, in clinging to our perspective, we miss the chance to truly understand? Now think about your daily life. How many times have you found yourself absolutely certain you were right, only to discover later that the story had another side? Maybe in a disagreement with a friend, where their explanation suddenly shed light on something you hadn't considered. Or at work, when a colleague pointed out a factor you'd overlooked, changing the entire outcome. These moments remind us of a powerful truth. No matter how clear our perspective feels, it is always incomplete. Today, we'll explore this idea through the story of the blind men and the elephant, an ancient parable with timeless lessons about perspective, truth, and understanding. It's a story that invites us to reflect deeply on how we see the world and how we relate to others. In a distant village, there lived 6 blind men who were widely respected for their wisdom. Despite their lack of sight, their insights often illuminated the most complex problems. They had a reputation for being perceptive, thoughtful, and wise. People would travel from nearby villages to seek their counsel, knowing their words carried depth and meaning. One day, news spread through the village about a fascinating creature that had arrived, an elephant. This massive and majestic animal had been brought by a merchant who was traveling through the region. The blind men, curious and eager to understand, decided they needed to experience the elephant for themselves. If we can touch it, they said, we will surely understand what it is. When they arrived, the merchant agreed to let them approach the elephant. The first man reached out and placed his hands on the elephant's side. He felt its vast, rough surface and confidently declared, "The elephant is like a wall, broad, solid, and immovable. Its strength lies in its stability." The second man, standing near the front, touched one of the tusks. Feeling its smooth, sharp curve, he immediately disagreed. "No, the elephant is like a spear, hard, pointed, and capable of piercing anything in its path." The third man, reaching out toward the elephant's trunk, felt it gently moving in his hands. Smiling, he said, "You're both mistaken. The elephant is like a snake, flexible, alive, and full of energy." Meanwhile, the fourth man, touching one of the elephant's thick legs, laughed at the others. "What are you talking about? The elephant is like the trunk of a tree, sturdy, grounded, and strong." The fifth man, brushing his hands over the elephant's ear, chuckled. "You're all wrong. The elephant is like a fan, wide and soft, capable of creating a breeze." Finally, the sixth man, holding the elephant's tail, shook his head in frustration. "You're all fools. The elephant is like a rope, thin, coarse, and full of knots." Each of the men was absolutely certain of his perception. Each believed his experience defined the whole truth. And so, they began to argue. Their voices rose, each defending his understanding of the elephant as the only correct one. The debate grew louder and more heated, with none of them willing to back down. It was then that the merchant intervened. Speaking calmly, he said, "You are all correct, but also all mistaken. Each of you touched only a part of the elephant. None of you experienced the whole. If you were to combine your perspectives, you would see the truth." The blind men fell silent, reflecting on his words. For the first time, they realized that their differences weren't contradictions. They were pieces of a larger puzzle. Together, they could understand what none of them could grasp alone. This story is about more than elephants or arguments. It's a metaphor for how we experience life. Each of us moves through the world with a limited perspective, shaped by our unique experiences and beliefs. Like the blind men, we often cling to what we've touched, convinced it's the whole truth. But the reality is always more complex, always bigger than what any one person can see. Philosophers have wrestled with this idea for centuries. Friedrich Nietzsche famously said, "There are no facts, only interpretations." While this doesn't mean truth doesn't exist, it reminds us that what we perceive is always filtered through our own lens. The world we see is shaped by our expectations, our culture, and our experiences. In Buddhism, there's a concept called shunyata, or emptiness. It teaches that nothing exists independently. Everything is interconnected. The truth of anything can only be understood by considering its relationships with everything else. Like the elephant in the story, reality is vast and interconnected, far beyond what any one perspective can capture. But why do we cling so tightly to our own views? Often, it's the ego at work. The ego thrives on certainty. It wants to be right, to be validated, to feel superior. In the story, each blind man defended his perspective, not because the others were wrong, but because their disagreement threatened his sense of understanding. How often do we do the same? How often do we mistake being right for being wise? Wisdom lies in humility, the ability to say, "I may be wrong," or "I don't see the whole picture." In Zen Buddhism, there's a teaching that says the cup must be empty before it can be filled. To learn, we must first let go of what we think we know. Now, think about your own life. How many times have you clung to your perspective in a disagreement, only to later realize there was more to the story? How many times have you missed an opportunity to learn because you were too focused on defending your position? The story of the blind men and the elephant reminds us of the beauty of diversity. Each perspective, no matter how limited, holds value. Together, they create a fuller picture of the truth. Imagine what would happen if, instead of arguing to prove our point, we asked, "What are you seeing that I'm not?" That single question has the power to transform conflicts into opportunities for connection and growth. Take a moment today to reflect on your own perspective. Where are you holding on too tightly? Where might you benefit from listening more? In your next conversation, try this. Before responding, pause and ask, "Can you help me understand your view?" You might be surprised by how much you'll learn. If this reflection resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, we explore stories, teachings, and practices that challenge your thinking and expand your understanding. Together, we can learn to see the world with greater clarity, humility, and wisdom. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue this journey of discovery and growth.